Hello, I'm David, CEO and founding developer of VZ. Our purpose here is building better pathways for student and supporter success. This is a very unusual format. I don't know how we pulled this all together, and I'll explain probably in about 15 seconds how. But first, quick 15 seconds because everyone says I say something later. Gabby McCollum, Virginia Tech, is how I met Frank and how I met CL. And Dennis is on board because we started this whole initiative together. So I wanted to realize something that we have a Jedi and we have a model on board here. Guess which one I'm talking about?
Well, is who's the Jedi? That's what I want to know. Is it CL that's the Jedi?
I think so.
Okay, yeah. All right, good.
Well, then who's the model? I heard, at Williamsburg, I was on Big Bad Wolf one day, and there's a roller coaster, and there's a famous model there. And Frank, you look exactly like this guy with this long flowing hair. What's his name?
Oh, are you talking about Fabio?
Yes.
Yes, some people call me Fabio. I have no idea why.
Well, I spoke to Byron this morning. You know why. So, both of y'all, I got some good insight on you. But real quick for the audience listening, we got a serious topic to talk about today. We have a lot of clients on our side that want to understand what's in your brain. But first, can you guys talk a little bit about yourselves? So I will shoot first with, should I say President Shushok or can I say Frank?
Frank is much better than President Shushok. I can promise you. Hey, well, I'm Frank Shushok, and as you mentioned, I spent 13 years at Virginia Tech until just this past July when I became the 12th president of Roanoke College. And gosh, what I love is thinking about young people and their potential and the way that an education can be designed to help them find their next best self. I think about the reality that we're always in the process of becoming. And nothing is more beautiful than when a college or university or higher education environment is constructed in a way that helps bring out the best in someone and their next best self, their potential, helps them on their journey to playing their most important role in whatever life that they're going to live.
Cool. We'll dig into your past a little bit, but CL, talk a little bit about you, your role, and who you are.
Yeah, sure. So CL Bohnannon, Associate Dean for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. I'm the Jedi at the University of Virginia in the School of Architecture. And I just landed here this summer. I, like Frank, spent about 12 years at Virginia Tech as an educator in landscape architecture, an administrator, as school director for the School of Design, but probably most impactfully as a faculty principal, as the first faculty principal, actually, for the Leadership and Social Change Residential College, and had a chance to do that for 4 years. And I echo Frank, just being in a space where students first come to us and seeing them grow and seeing them develop, and carving out the space, for mistakes to happen, for development and growth to happen, and to create a nourishing environment for our students to go off into the world. So it's been fun.
Awesome. And Dennis, talk a little bit about your role.
Dennis Wiese, I'm Assistant Vice Chancellor for Student Affairs at University of North Carolina at Charlotte, responsible for our student onboarding process, and similar, very much committed to the successful transition of our students into the institution and also their family members and supporters. And my background has really been looking at those opportunities for students to engage with the campus and for the campus to engage across barriers, across silos. Spent a lot of my time in academic affairs, student affairs, collaborative partnership to make sure that our students are being provided the best possible experience they can while they're on campus. So really appreciate the opportunity to join the conversation and really look forward to learning more about both your backgrounds, but then also your vision for the future and really what you see as opportunities for not only your own individual campuses, but, also higher ed in general. Because I think, you both are in very, in some ways different positions, but also with that shared background and shared history, I think could provide some fantastic insight for those that are joining us.
Cool. So you said joining us, we got a platform here, and the platform is our clients. And you guys are on the higher end, and all around the scope and what you're doing are very great, and we all have different roles in life. My audience really is orientation professionals on the front lines. And what you're doing is great. And I think how this all came together, and Frank, I'm going to joke you on this one, and you probably know what I'm going to bring up later. Frank's the matchmaker. And what I mean by that, he somehow brought all of us back together in our pre-interview. He's like, hey, I haven't seen CL in a while. And, I saw on LinkedIn that we did a book, and thank you, David, for doing this. But that book is something important to me because what you're talking about in it. And if I'd like to ask a little bit behind is, how did you guys match up to be able to write the book? And if you can talk about the title, talk about, the specific chapter that we're talking about today. I have tons of questions from my clients over the last 24 hours. My inbox is flooded and I have them all here.
Wow, that is great, David. Well, I'll just, I'll start by telling you a little bit about the book, and it's this one. It's right here. It's called, I'm just seeing where the camera is exactly, but there it is. All right, the faculty. Yeah, it's the faculty factor, developing faculty engagement with living learning communities, and I think that what you'll hear CL and I are really passionate about is that thinking about the entire college environment as this giant learning laboratory that students are in a space of learning no matter where they are, whether it's in the classroom or it's a residential environment, that people don't see their roles in particular kinds of ways, although they provide leadership in intellectual life or in social life, but all of us play a role in the entire development of students. And in this thing that CL was the faculty principal of is an experiment that we dreamed up. That what if we created an environment, a residential environment, a residential college that emphasized helping students prepare to lead in a social justice kind of way, and turn that into this environment that is both intellectually stimulating, a place of experiential learning and practice, of friendship, of building relationships all across different backgrounds, and then that's where CL comes in. He's the leader of this experiment, and did just a remarkable and beautiful job. I mean, he's a pretty amazing guy in lots of ways, and just hearing a little bit about his background will say a lot about the kind of world that CL is passionate about creating. And it really comes down to the kind of human beings that CL wants to see, or that we all want to see come out of a college or university. We want them to be the kind of people that leave a college or university feeling compelled to make a difference, to make the world a little better for other people, not just for themselves and their families, but for others in the communities they live in. And that's what this experiment is. And, what we think is that the more of these little experiments that are happening, whether those are in orientation environments or residence halls or in classrooms, that the more likely it is that we're going to get this really powerful college or university experience. It's going to launch people out in the world to do good. And that's what this is about. So CL, you tell them about your vision, man.
All right.
Got it.
So our, the leadership and social change residential college was it was an experiment, and we were able to develop a program that I feel that we allowed our students to develop and grow in terms of being able to ask critical questions about the world around them, which this goes from, having conversations at dinner with the engineer and the poet, right, about sustainability or about the built environment. And I think we were able to provide opportunities for students to get out of their own academic silos before they got into them as newcomers to the university, and to establish a framework for collaboration and understanding of how interconnected society really is, and for them to be developing their skills as problem solvers in the world, right? And knowing that we need each other in order to actually be change agents, and developing that habit of practice from the time when they joined us in the summer, in many cases, and then with the 2-year commitment before we release them back into the world. I think our students did remarkable. They were leaders within the building, within the community, external to the community, taking those life lessons that, in particular with, in order to change the world, we can't be thinking about ourselves as individuals. We're all connected, and being able to model that at a university like Virginia Tech with 30,000 plus students. If you land at a place like that as a newcomer, it's a big place. And so we strive to make the LSCRC home while they were there, when they graduate, when they move off campus. They always had a place to return back to do the good work to make a better society.
So let me just point out something. CL is a faculty member in landscape architecture, but he and his partner, Jen, planted their life in this building. They've lived in the building with students. His wife is a political scientist. Students in the building are studying about leadership in credit-bearing courses. They're doing service learning, and they're coming back and they're processing their interactions with the community, and they're designing educational experiences themselves, trying to understand how to make an impact in the world. So it really is this holistic laboratory. And CL, maybe you can tell them just about the weekly event that you have and what would happen there as part of that weekly event right there.
I interrupt once in a while, and I agree, Frank. I'm sorry for interrupting, but the relationship you have. What was the audience of the book when you guys wrote the book? Who's supposed to be reading it? Who is that going to be delivered to?
Oh, well, the book is how do you create a culture that not only engages faculty in the whole life of students, but invites faculty to be part of the architecture of the entire thing.
Got it.
And so, so often, we think of faculty as they do their thing in the classroom. And if you think about CL, he's a landscape architect. I mean, that's what he teaches in the College of Architecture. But he's got a whole lot of interest. I mean, he's passionate about equity. He's passionate about building sustainable communities. He's passionate about people. His expertise and his passion is so much larger than landscape architecture. It incorporates landscape architecture. And he has a lot of ideas about how you craft learning environments. And so by inviting him out of that world and giving him domain over a world that, some people would say, oh, well, that's the student affairs people. We did that in partnership, and we did it in partnership with the College of Agriculture, and a whole lot of partnerships to push down all those walls that we artificially create in a college or university that help us organize our thinking but don't serve students well.
That makes sense. So back to CL with the event. Sorry, Frank, to interrupt you. You were talking about an event. What event did you want CL to talk about? What he's been doing?
And actually, I'll loop it back to what Frank just talked about. So I learned we have these weekly traditions. And the way I actually was introduced to the weekly traditions was by another faculty principal, Eric Kaufman, who invited me to come into what we would call faculty, basically. And it's basically a talk given by a faculty member.
I love that.
And residential college students are there and ask questions. And it's just a way for our students to meet faculty that they normally would not interact with. I mean, if you don't take my class, you don't get a chance to really meet with me. And so even my introduction to the entire residential college system at Virginia Tech was, again, a connection, personal connection with a fellow faculty member who was already involved in that. And so for me, it was like a no-brainer to continue something similar in the LSCRC to provide space for not only for our students to come into the space and learn and to be enlightened and be critical and think and have a free space to do so, but also to invite fellow colleagues into that space I actually demystify the whole process of what we were trying to do with live-in faculty, residential colleges and living learning programs at Virginia Tech. And so the weekly tradition would, invite folks from across campus, many different expertise, faculty, staff, community members in many cases, to come in and to talk about how their work intersects with leadership and social change, and to put a short presentation together. We would break bread together as a way of fellowship, and then also provide space for students to be in community and ask questions with our speaker. And we did that weekly. That was a weekly tradition that students would just, they knew it was happening. They can show up for it.
Well, I want to keep focused on the book that you guys were doing, and no interruption. But Dennis, I'd like you to lead in maybe with a question.
Yeah. So, see, I'm interested because residential colleges have been around a long time. We kind of stole that idea from European. You think of Oxford and Cambridge and those. That's kind of a foundation for a lot of that. CL, I'm interested for you. What was the inspiration for you to take on this opportunity? Because you had to move from wherever you were living to this residential space. That's a big leap. Mm-hmm. And so, what was kind of that tipping point? What was that inspiration for you to say, I'm willing to do this? I want that to happen. Because I think for a lot of campuses, that's one of the big limiters for residential colleges is obviously it's the financial expense, but it's getting faculty members like yourself to say, I'm willing to go do this. So I'm intrigued as to what really brought you into that space.
Yeah. So for me, part of my background, I'm a community engaged scholar. I'm a landscape architect, but I do work that's rooted in community. Everything I do is rooted in the community. And the LSCRC was a perfect matchup of my interest and how I can see my interest actually be in service to the students in our community and be in service of the university and its mission to really enhance our living, learning spaces, right? To make sure that we have a community for our students as they land within the university, but also that they can be celebrated and thrive while they're students at the university, to set them up to be successful once they leave. And so for me, it was a pretty, I had to talk to my wife and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. And she was fully supportive of that, because if that didn't happen, it wouldn't have happened. But also it intersects with her work. So for us as a family, we just have a passion for making the world better. And so, I have an impact within the College of Architecture, but to be able to expand that to 350 people outside of my own, school domain was like, I must do this. I feel like I had to do it. I feel like I was called to do it, and I enjoyed my time. So I think for me, it was just being able to interact and learn from so many different students that I probably would not have had a chance to meet. And that was basically an incentive for me, was, it was driven by my own interest and how I can be in service of the mission.
So Frank, I have a question for you. A lot of my clients came back and it's like, why would a president speak to David Morales? And it's very confusing. But reality is you're an intelligent man and you are a leader. I know the fact you are. When I spoke to Byron this morning and he told me how you brought everybody together. You are a leader. And I want to say, you don't have to have anyone tell you. You don't have to say it yourself. Guess what? This man is saying it to you. You are a great leader. How are you approaching at Roanoke College this new scope that you're thinking? What's going on there?
Well, thanks for saying that. I'm just blessed because I've spent my whole career being surrounded by excellent people who care a lot about doing something important. Listen, whatever environment I land in, I'm looking for the energy. So where is the energy? Where are the people who care deeply about what we're doing and why it's important? And those people love to be around each other because they want their one and only life and the job that they're doing to add up to something that makes a difference. Lots of us can choose different jobs, but we lean into places that feel like a sense of something bigger going on. So you heard that so why am I attracted to CL, and why did we end up writing a book chapter together? Why did we end up in partnership in the creation of this? Is because we have similar visions for what a college or university can do. And it's about the transformation that can happen in the individual person. It's about the transformation that can happen in us. I mean, we are in process and are becoming as well because we're in community with others, and this deep and abiding belief that a college or university is fundamentally about making the world a little better, a little just, a little more kind, a little more beautiful, that beauty is created by working together to create something new. And the reason I say new is if we're not always changing to meet the needs of current students and those who are coming, then we're not doing our job. Because at any given moment, a college or university is probably designed for those who have already been there. And so if we're not constantly interrogating what is or what can be, then we're not serving our current and future students very well. And so what I do is I look for people who have a lot of energy and who have a sense of purpose about their life and who want to be with others that want to invest in creating something new for what's coming next.
So I have I said this in the beginning. I'm here to learn. You guys got PhDs. I don't have PhDs, and I'm the pupil here, right? My experience is maybe hard knocks from all of our clients. It seems like this is a great idea that you guys have and that you wrote about it. I heard the word experiment, dreamed up, change agents, and all these things. They're very important, and I believe in it. And I would like to disseminate that also and share that with other people. But on a campus structure, if it came from Virginia Tech and then to Roanoke and UVA, one of my clients asked this is, does student population on campus change what you guys are writing about? Having faculty members, the lens of faculty members being on campus. Can one of you talk about that? Does that shape any difference?
For me, I think actually having a little bit of time to step away, since I don't live on campus anymore, but I work with colleagues here at UVA, right? Going back to HRL and trying to understand how the residential college environment works here, because that's something I just believe in. And now I'm trying to connect faculty within the A school, the architecture school here, with students that are in our first and second year residence halls, because at UVA they don't pick a major until after their first year. So being able to provide again, making those connections for faculty and students that sometimes would never interact. You never know what type of profound shaping a meeting can have with someone, right? And so being able to now be in a position to kind of help move that along a little bit differently than being a faculty principal, but speaking from that faculty principal experience, I can now kind of be like Frank in a way, and be able to see what he saw in me and other people, and be able to bring folks together. So no matter how much change we have with newcomers to our institutions, I do think that it is important for our faculty to be engaged in that way with them outside of just a traditional classroom experience. I just think it makes education, not only for the students, phenomenal, but also for faculty members. We're lifelong learners, a lot of folks that are interested in this type of work. So we don't shy away from spaces where we are not the expert. I actually love to engage in that, because it gives me something to kind of think about, finding new readings, new podcasts, and a new way of understanding the world. And so I just think that partnership between student affairs and academic units is something that many schools need to look at. You can think about different models of how it works, but being in that space for so long, now I can't undo it. I can't, Frank, you did this. I can't unsee, and this is how I operate. And it's even made, even the way I approach my job as associate dean in a different way. It just, it's, I think I told Frank this once before, it made me more patient as a faculty member. It made me embrace the ways that our students come to the university and think, and that they can also challenge us in different ways. And it just keeps you on your toes, and it keeps you honest. And it's a constant kind of an environmental check or barometer to what's happening in society. It keeps us honest.
I love that, because that's the best thing about Orientation Matters. And this is where I told you our audience is listening.
Gotcha.
Orientation Matters. The incoming class, whether you're non-traditional or traditional, you know what I mean, the age range makes no difference. It's a litmus test of like the whole like society of everybody flowing in, that if you can keep that connection point. But that was a great thing. Sorry to interrupt, because I know Frank wants to say something.
No, well, David, I want to play to your audience, and that's orientation a little bit here. So, context matters, but we all can lose track of why we're doing what we're doing. So whether it's orientation or teaching classes or administrative processes or putting people in residence halls, putting people in classes, getting people degrees, putting people through orientation, none of those are the purpose. Those are the means. But in our day-to-day lives, we often forget why we're doing what we're doing when we're doing it. And as soon as that happens, then we lose attention to the design process that can create something really transformational. And I think, in this, we're talking about residence halls and finding a deep sense of purpose in what we're doing and knowing that it really matters. Well, whether you're in a classroom environment as a tenured professor, or you're running a residence hall or an orientation program, remembering what it is that you're trying to create in a human being because they experienced orientation, or because they lived in a residence hall, or because they sat in that class. That's what it's all about. And we do that better together. And, David, you started just a minute ago with this kind of, CL and I have PhDs, or the thing is, we're all learners. I mean, and we can all learn from each other. In fact, we'd all be a little better, those of us with PhDs, to spend a little more time with people who don't have PhDs, and learning from students and learning from our housekeepers and dining services people. That is community. And I agree. Those experiences are transformational. And so how we design those matters, and we can lose track of that. I mean, getting people through orientation is not the purpose of orientation. It is about the onboarding of something really transformational.
So Dennis,
it's interesting because it links that concept of culture that you've talked about and the importance of building culture and developing culture. And, that's kind of the subtext of the book and the article. And so I'm interested from both of your perspectives. Orientation is really about transmitting that culture, right? Talking about that. And so I'm interested in both of your experiences on and your thoughts on how through your lenses you're able to advance that sense of culture with your new students, or students who are in residence or now CL with your role. How you're communicating that sense of culture and what it means to be a student, and also develop that sense of belonging with those students.
Yeah. So I can share a couple things that actually, we had a very difficult semester, end of the semester here at UVA, with the tragedy that happened on campus, and it brought a lot of things to the surface. And one of those was the fact that, goes back to what Frank was saying about oftentimes we lose focus on why we do the things that we do. And that is particularly relevant in design school, where we're just, up and doing designs and drawings and models and things like that. And sometimes the students are you just lose sight of the world around you. And it took a tragedy like that to happen for us to pause and to stop and take note that we are humans and that we do need connection and that we do care. And for me, stepping in as pretty much the chief, diversity officer for the school, and part of it is the notion of belonging and being able to create space for students to just be seen, to be recognized, to be together, to be in community was one of the things that I think we needed it. And it took something like that to kind of make us come out of our bubble in order to create space then and continue to create space now. It's pretty much changed the culture of the school in a slight way with the tragedy and coming out of the pandemic of how to even be together. That is something that we're taking note of. And so really for us is listening to the students in terms of what they actually need, and not to make assumptions in that regard. And so it's been a lot of the effort just to be in space together, whether if that involves food or not, but just being in a place where you can be and conversate. And we're not really trying to, not being in meetings where people are asking you what's wrong and how do we fix it. Right. But, yeah.
No, keep going. That was good.
So, yeah. So for us, it's like a return to community and what that means, because through all the stuff that's happened and we've lost some of our ways in terms of how we actually are, how do we get together, right? Just on a daily basis, not even talking about being in class and in the studio environment upstairs or anything like that, but taking a new reading on that and how do we make that part of this new reimagined culture of what we want to be for in the future within the A school. And then how does that translate to how we educate students, how we then work with our external community partners here in Central Virginia and across the Commonwealth. So it's really started to allow us to take note and reassess all the things, all the practices that we do, and how do we do those in a more just and equitable and more community-friendly way.
Well, it's heavy loaded because I have a couple questions, but I'm going to go back to Frank, and everyone can see my screen. I'm pointing down right now. I believe in a 30,000-foot view because you have to see the big vision, right? And we talk the architecture, design process, and everything, and we get to a 100-foot level where we have to rappel from a helicopter and go down and do what we got to do, and then we got to get in the weeds. My clients have questions from the weeds. So, Frank, I have someone who had a specific question for you, if you don't mind answering. It has to deal with Katie Johnson at CNU, Christopher Newport University. They've been doing, when I started my company back in the day, that was my second client that I had, and that's 2005 when we onboarded them. Learning communities was my life. I understood that, blah, 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 but I didn't understand the faculty lens ever until you came into my mind and you changed me. But what she had was her question is that the trust level of the students. So the trust level of a student in high school, K through 12, I look at your career services and all the things that you all have done. And this is why I think you're a visionary and I believe in what you're doing. I want to carry the word and what we're fucking doing here. Sorry, I curse and I can edit that out. Don't worry. But I do believe in one thing is building out this relationship that's wrong with a high school teacher. And now you're bringing them into college to a new teacher. That whole transition. So I'm going to argue with you a little bit, Frank, and saying I think orientation is more important. To acclimate people to a new way of thinking and transitioning them correctly, it is a small piece. But I know your bigger vision, but what is your response to saying, how do you acclimate students that had maybe an improper relationship with a teacher, now coming to a college and maybe joining with that faculty member?
Yeah, well, so David, I wasn't trying to delineate anything as more important than something else. In fact, I would say everything is important. It's understanding why we do what we do. And so, my formative question that I ask myself always is, what am I trying to increase the probability of occurring? And so let's just take orientation for a second. And if you ask yourself, what am I trying to increase the probability of occurring because of orientation? You are answering that question by even posing the question of, you just said, I think what I heard you say in that is trying to help students develop trusting relationships with faculty.
It wasn't it's from my client.
Okay, well, from your client. So that's a design question. And you have to know that that's something you're trying to do. And then you have to think about how do you create the conditions to allow that to happen. And that's a design, that is a design challenge. And when you hold it up and look at it as that's what you're trying to increase probably occurring, if you really think about that, you're going to design that very differently than probably a lot of our orientation programs are designed. Because I've seen a lot of orientation programs and supervised a lot of orientation programs. And I haven't seen them developing trusting relationships with faculty as a result of their orientation experience, because they're not really designed to do that. They often, but they can be, and they could be really effective at doing that. But we're probably going to need to do some things differently if that really is what you're trying to increase the probability of occurring.
Well, I think your design process is correct. I've seen it, and I think that includes orientation leaders also. I'm a big advocate of having those peer mentors, all those people along with faculty to give that sense of belonging as a movement process through the whole 4 or 5, 6 years or whatever you're doing at your school. Very impressed. I didn't mean to segue from the conversation, but that's the
Can I make one connection to CL? I mean, I'm just going to use CL as an example. CL's role in this residential college, he was seen as a friend, a mentor, and a coach that students deeply, deeply trusted, and sought his advice and counsel about all sorts of things that span intellectual life to career decisions, to personal decisions and life decisions. That's because of the design of what was put together. And so that's just an example of the kind of work that we can do if we're really intentional about thinking about what we're trying to design. And I personally think it's that relationship that a lot of students had with CL and other faculty members that did the kind of role that he did that was candidly transformational for students. And, I just get to say too, especially around issues of diversity and identity. And I mean, it created a level of discourse that I think would be really difficult to create in some other environments because they live together.
Correct. Well, I want to throw what Byron said this morning. So Frank, you said you had the ability to have turning points, which is great. And when I say great, that's not condescending. Like, I believe it when he was saying it. But we talk about advising and coaching and everything like that. And he said that's what you found in him. The ability for him to advise and help people and doing that. And I think it's a strong leadership attribute that can translate. But back to CL and you, he had some good things with you. Like you're freaking good with people, man. And that's what he said is you got to surround yourself with people who can connect. And I think Byron's right. And CL, I got to kudos, like I have this phrase, if no one can pat your back, lift your hand up and pat yourself. I think you should pat yourself. You do good work over there. But how do you build those relationships with people? Like if anyone in the orientation, our audience can hear, I think it's a good attribute to have. So we have leadership, and also making relationships.
For me, I think not being afraid to spark up a conversation, to go talk, to go chat, go have a coffee. These are all the things that I did, not only with students to make them feel connected and for me to connect with them, but also for faculty to get them introduced to the work that we were doing to help build that team. Because, I mean, if you think we had a team of faculty principals, and which was a really good group. And then there was a team of other faculty that were just engaged with the residential colleges. And I think those relationships were built off just making connections and not being afraid to go seek people out that you think could be beneficial to the students. And yeah, I still do that today. I didn't realize I was that good with people, but I appreciate those with it. But
tell me some stories. So you're awesome.
All right. Yeah. I think just not being afraid to make the connections, and also I will add to this too. By us doing that as faculty and administrators, it also models behavior for our students. Most important, they see us do it in a positive way. Those faculties and community dinners where we invite people in, it provides a space for those students to build those skills as well, right? And then we're starting to move the needle. We have more people that are not afraid to make connections, to make the world better, to question, to be in a space in a very intentional way. I think that's what matters.
So Dennis,
you just kind of, so you just kind of hit on this a little bit, and I'm thinking about for those campuses that they don't have these residential experiences, and they don't necessarily have some of these intentional engagement points. And so I'm interested for those campuses, be they larger or smaller, that don't have those touch points. How can orientation professionals and those that are really in this transition space, create those environments for students and their supporters to build those relationships with faculty members?
I think, at the most simple level, having a lunch or dinner or some space where you can break bread together is really important, and being able to set the tone in that way allows for, again, that kind of cross-pollination of ideas, and for people that sometimes wouldn't meet each other on a regular basis, have space together to build those relationships. And I think that's a good way to start it. We've even, again, just we're referencing back to what we're doing here in the A school. We realized that a lot of our students don't get a chance to meet all the faculty. So having intentional like coffee hours or moments where you can actually take a break to reflect, doesn't cost much, but the impact goes a long way. So I think if schools that don't have the current infrastructure to go all in for like a living learning program or a residential college, start small with the meetings that you can have, and then scaffold up as your infrastructure grows. But I think oftentimes having the kind of the small interactions, they have the biggest impact. So.
I have a question. It's emotional. Sorry, go ahead, Dennis.
I'm sorry. I was going to ask Frank, if you don't mind. As these folks are thinking about this, what's kind of that pitch to their leadership? What's kind of the, hey, this is why we think we should do this, and this is why we think it's important. What resonates? What would resonate for you if someone was to come and give you a presentation saying, "Here's what we're wanting to accomplish, and would love your buy-in."
Yeah, and Dennis, I like to encourage people because we created this at Virginia Tech. I mean, we have multiple residential colleges and multiple living learning programs now. And to CL's point, 4 or 5 faculty principals that are holding domain over these really beautiful, what were once experimental places that were designed to create certain outcomes in our students. So we didn't have those. We dreamed those up by following the energy, getting around with people who have real clarity about what we were trying to do. And what we were doing is we're trying to build better human beings at a large research university where the focus is often on large research university kinds of things. And we wanted to make sure that at the undergraduate level that we were designing ground up transformational experiences, learning experiences for undergraduates where they had meaningful relationships with faculty members like they would have at a college like I'm at now, a small liberal arts college, where it's expected that you have meaningful relationships, frequent contact with faculty. But at Virginia Tech, that was harder. So we had to design to do that differently. And so, the pitch is, what kind of education do you want to deliver? And how do you design that? If you want to build better human beings, you've got to put them in proximity with people who have different life experiences. And you've got to create an environment where they can develop relationships and talk about meaningful things and ask questions that might influence the way you think and therefore the way you behave going forward. So again, it goes back to what are you trying to increase the probability of occurring and then designing to that. And that's having living learning programs in of itself, or even residential colleges, is not really that sexy. What is what those particular things are designed to create from a human perspective. So, I think we've got to tell the story about what we're really trying to do, not just mimicking something that other schools have.
I agree. And so, Dennis, I'm going to jump in. So, I said emotional before, and Frank, I'm going to piggyback off you. One of my clients is Jose Villar from University of New Mexico, and he deals with first gen. That school is huge. They got a lot of stuff going on. And before we actually started this podcast today, I had a meeting with him, and he's very intrigued with the same thing. He's diehard, man. I'm telling you, he had a family member that come in. He would waive the orientation fees for them, take it out of his pocket if he had to. difference is he asked that if we're involving these faculty members so much, what about the burnout? What about these people, or those opportunities you're talking about that students get to meet? Some of these faculty members not be groomed and properly trained to deal with that constant contact. How are you addressing that in this design process of the opportunities for a student to speak to a leader?
Well, and the good news is that in particular was the subject of TL and I's chapter. It is really how do you incentivize and support faculty who take on these different kinds of roles. So I'll give you an example, a really practical example. In the tenure and promotion process at a research university, I think everyone knows service is counted at a very minor amount. And then it's teaching, and then it's research and publication. But forever, people thought if someone do something like what CL was doing, that's service. And actually, we began to look at it very differently at Virginia Tech. It's teaching. It's teaching delivered in a very different way. And we were also beginning to look at our tenure and promotion policies at a research university to think differently about how we reward faculty for the kind of choices that they make in their engagement on a college and university campus. And so, you can't just ask them to tack these things on and not rethink how you think about what faculty is or what teaching is. So there's a lot of re-envisioning all sorts of things because you're asking the big questions of what you're trying to do, and then whether the current systems and reward processes actually are working for or against your aims.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Drive, that book, Daniel Pink, and intrinsic versus extrinsic, and that's what we were talking about, orientation leaders, of how to motivate people. Motivation is a hard thing, especially when you're a leader, very hard thing, and that's part of a design process. But also, you got to be adaptable for change, and every year being something new. So, Dennis, you want to throw out another question?
Sure. Earlier, you were talking about, higher ed being designed to meet the needs of generations past. And so I'm interested, given both of your roles, when you start thinking about generations of the future and what higher ed could be, should be doing, what's that look like? And then, again, obviously thinking about from an orientation perspective, how can those folks that are joining facilitate or help facilitate that future vision?
Jump in, CL. Because CL's when you're doing equity and diversity work, you were trying to redesign, essentially to redesign the university to meet the needs of a student that wasn't served before.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a lot of work going in that vein, but having I just contextualize it within the School of Architecture, and for us, it's like really questioning who has had access to design education in the past, right? And even how our fields have actually led to a lot of the inequalities that many of our students who don't have access to our universities live in, right? And so making sure that we're doing the work to show up in places where we have not.
CL, how many Black male landscape architecture professors are there out there?
There are probably 4, 5 of us, I think. 4 or 5, yeah. Not many at all. And so for me, it's like, it's part of my medicine to show up in those spaces. I didn't have anybody who looked like me at all from undergrad to PhD, other than my dad, who was an architect. Right. And so for me, I was like, I can be that for someone else. Because, you never know when you meet with someone and you talk to students, how that can change their lives. I had students in the LSCRC that were wavering whether to leave tech and do these other kind of things, but I could get them to stay because either they came to landscape architecture or they went to some other major because I knew of other faculty who could help them. And so if we're going to educate folks in the future we have to be able to open up the door in ways that we have not before. There's a particular way we think about that here at UVA, you know, being Thomas Jefferson's University, and our president so eloquently says, if it's Thomas Jefferson's University, it's also Sally Hemings University. And we're going to do all we can to make sure we hold true to that, to be a great and good institution. So for me, you know, that means we need to show up in places we haven't shown up. We need to have conversations with students early on about their opportunities to obtain a degree, right? Whether if it's in architecture or whatever, but what is a future imaginary for that potential student look like to be on grounds, right? To be influenced by all the things that a university has to offer.
You nailed it. And this is where I'm going to segue in a positive.
Right. Yeah.
I'm a man of OLs, but also a man of pre-advising and advising. And I kind of heard a little, that's why I wrote it down, is communicate early, right? If you get your advisors out there and educating people what curriculums they should do, not what they see on back in the day MTV, but now TikTok, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Shaping those minds when you have a chance. And that is why I think orientation is very important. When I say orientation, not orientation sessions, it's really the gap of getting those students in. That if you can get advising very strong, and the reason I'm saying this is I'm doing another podcast with another university to share why pre-advising and advising is so freaking important. It's amazing. Can you guys just for like maybe 45 seconds each, maybe 2 minutes each, explain why advising even for career services or whatever is so important in that beginning stage?
Well, I think I might try to be too simple here for your sophisticated question, but you know, I think human beings have a deep need to be understood and to feel like that they matter. And if you can start out on a foot where there's another human being who seems interested in what you're trying to do, where you're trying to go, and wants to link arms with you and walk with you, then you'll walk a lot further when you've got that. And that's what, you know, a good advisor does is in that transition, they link arms with you. They ask you good questions. They listen intently. They think about you and your best interests, and they help you navigate what for many is a really complex system called higher education. And if you are first generation, or underrepresented, underserved, then it's even more mysterious how this whole thing we call getting a degree gets unraveled. But if you've got someone who's your advocate from day one, you just keep walking forward because that person cares about you and is going to help translate for you. And that's a game changer.
I think it's huge. And I'm going to paraphrase you, linking arms. I think it's what pre-advising does. University of North Dakota is one of our leading advocates on that. And even today, Alan Mullis from Tennessee Tech, and we were talking about they're doing course ranking out there. People got to plan, you know, not just for classroom sizes, how many teachers they're getting and everything, but it's taking the influence of following that path, right, all the way through. I think that's key. And thank you for saying that. But CL, what's your opinion on, you know, how the influence of advising or pre-advising or advisors during the orientation phase is important?
I think it's actually absolutely, you have to do it. All right. So my time spent at Tech when I was the school director for the School of Architecture and Design, I worked hand in hand with our advisors. I mean, I had meetings with them outside of, you know, the meeting with the chairs because I wanted to understand the process by which when students come to the institution, even before they even get admitted, that they meet our advisors. Those are the people that can help them start off on a good path, but stay on that path. And quite frankly, they're probably more responsible for students actually, you know, getting through and navigating sometimes the swamp of higher education, you know, with courses and all this other kind of stuff, and actually things that are not course related, just life related skills. A lot of times our advisors are our frontline people. And so I felt that getting our students in front of the advisors early so they can ask whatever questions they need and establish a kind of a protocol or a habit of practice of communication with advisors, not just when they need something, is really helpful, not only for the advisor, but for the student. It just creates a community of success that is not predicated on when something is wrong. but it starts to set a different path for how an advisor would traditionally interact with the student, which sometimes becomes very transactional. And I don't think transactional advisement is what our students need in today's society.
I agree. I want to relate a story, and I'm going to keep this university nameless, okay? It's in Virginia. This university was saying that when they do orientation, they want to have professors at least, and with the parents and students around when the advising is going on, so the faculty can meet at the same time, making sure it's aligned. I think what you guys are doing brilliant, and that's why, Frank, I said earlier about the trust level of students from a high school distrust of a teacher and transplanting and moving them across the board. It was an interesting concept of using orientation as a mechanism of saying, hey, you have these OLs, you have these advisors, which, CL just talked about the importance, but now maybe infusing the faculty right at that time too, of saying, okay, well, maybe you get to meet this, faculty member. Maybe you get to be introduced then. What do you think? That's you, Frank.
To me, I'm curious what CL. So
we'll go with CL then. That's fine. I'll take either answer.
Well, for us, I think it's actually important the point that you bring up, because we're a school of about 600-700 students, so we're small and nimble enough to do that, and we have enough faculty where we can, nudge them to be present in these events like this when we actually have students come to grounds, because it's an important link in the chain. I'm gonna go with and for students to meet with some of the faculty that they're going to have, with the coordinators of the programs, and we try to embed that in multiple ways as a student, before they even turn in the application, to when they start actually do early action and early admit, to when they actually we do the yield and people are here, and then they have the orientation. So there's multiple chances for our students before they even come to grounds, that are admitted to the university and that are interested in programs in the A school, where they've had a chance to meet with department chairs, program directors, faculty, even our deans. We show up because we think it's important. We don't want to be seen as the folks that are just off in the corner somewhere and we can kind of come off the mountain. That's not how we operate. We want all of our students to realize that we have a team of people that are here to make sure that they're successful.
So Frank, response?
I think anytime you can help demystify faculty for students, and the other way around is a really good thing. And going back to where we started this conversation, is CL and Jen living in the Leadership and Social Change Residential College. They realize that CL goes grocery shopping. He walks the dog, and he's a regular guy who has joys and sorrows and challenges, and has a life experience, and that has included hurdles and victories. I think that is great for students, and I think it's great. You heard CL talk about growing in his empathy for students because he understood what their lives looked like up close. So I think any way that we're able to build those kinds of relational knowledge early in an orientation process, the better.
Cool. Well, this is kind of a turning point. And Dennis, before I go on the turning point, do you have any other questions? But I'm going to ask them the crystal ball unless you have anything.
Just real quick, we've been talking a lot about and focusing on students. I'm interested, any insights on engagement of student family members and supporters in this process as well. We've done a lot of work within a lot of the podcasts that David has done, and talked a lot about the engagement of and the importance of the student supporter in the process, both in the selection of an institution and the onboarding and the ongoing success. And so Just interested, in your thoughts on how, the role that student supporters play in that experience, especially as it relates to the transition process, and how we can continue to work to engage those student supporters once the students are on our campus.
Yeah, one of the things that we did, and this is a response to the pandemic, we had a couple check-ins, virtual check-ins with family members as well of students, as we were, because the students are at that time, before people moved off campus, they were were away, things are happening, and sometimes family members just want to check in, and also want to hear about the cool stuff that we were doing in the community, because it was quite interesting. I learned from a couple of family members that students were enjoying themselves, but they weren't quite given all of the details of all the fun stuff that we were doing in the community. So they wanted to hear it firsthand. And I also think that was helpful, connecting with family members. And on the student side was also helpful for future generations of folks that were interested in coming into our living learning programs, because parents also talk, which I think is kind of interesting in that regard. So, yeah. And then, so I'll leave it at that.
Frank, on your side?
Frank? Yeah, I think CL's got it. I have this friend here in town. He's the head of a school, and he's really working to lift up kids, elementary kids who haven't had the best opportunities, but he knows that their success is deeply integrated with the success of their families, and so they've built this entire school around not only helping support the kids, but also their families as well. It's a holistic familial structure.
I like it.
I think, why does that work for elementary students? I mean, family structures are hugely powerful mechanisms, interrelated with our success in all sorts of ways. And so, the more that we understand that system and serve that system, the more likely we are to increase the probability of people's success.
Well, as we round the corner, though, I'm going to pick up on you, Frank. Most people don't know that behind the scenes, we've worked with Upward Bound, 8th grade to 12th grade of disadvantaged people, but understanding the mechanism of supporters at that level. But we're also looking at, you can take software, and we're a technology company, but the idea of understanding, I call it the ecosystem almost, of just how to traverse people all the way through. That's why I asked the question about, I'm looking at my list here, the trust level, relationship of, high school teachers, to go to college. But if you have a right program beforehand, it can make that process easier. So it starts earlier than college. So it's a bigger thing than orientation. I get that. This is the fun part. We've been picking your brains. I'm sorry if I, was maybe offensive or aggressive on all these things, but I think, I call them my crew, my team, my family, my network. Those are all my clients and all the people we serve. Man, we hit over 10 million people we touch every year. And that's a big feeling, but it's also a feeling of responsibility. So the responsibility I have is to flip this coin over. Is they want to ask you these questions, but they're also afraid to speak to a president and CL. They're also afraid to speak to someone of your level. They don't know how to communicate. So I know Sarah Dodge is out, at UVA and over there, and I know all these people, and they want to learn to communicate better. So as you're orchestrating this big plan and all these things, this is a twofold question. Is one, how would you like someone else from another department to communicate with you as part of your ecosystem? And the second part, which we'll do a little bit later, is crystal ball, is let them know what your roadmap is for 2-5 years. Just make it free. Like, there's no way you can really know. I meet these CIOs, they lay their technology plans. Let me tell you, a year later, it changes. But if you can give those two gifts to the people listening right now, I think they could walk away with something. So who would like to?
Okay, so the two questions were how to communicate. One with, with a sense of, one, directly, honestly, passionately, and with a clear articulation of what you're trying to increase the probability of occurring and why that matters. If that is just a beautiful, beautiful thing. And the second question was, were you asking for a roadmap 2 to 5 years out?
Yeah, a crystal ball, like 2 to 5 years, because these people are stuck in the weeds. Now we're taking out of the weeds, we're pedaling up a helicopter back in, going to 30,000 feet in Air Force One, right? So we're back on the big whole view here. You got to know what the roadmap is, but it's never perfect. But where can we see a clarity 2 to 5 years?
Well, I'll tell you about the roadmap that is, I think, is the nature of 21st century reality that will just continue to be. And it is one of flexibility, adaptability, and agility. And that any roadmap I lay down for 2 to 5 years, the chances of that being the roadmap in 2 to 5 years is almost zero. And so, I think that we're in an age of rapid change that will not stabilize, but will only increase. And what we really need to do is to be taking the temperature of the environment all the time and the changing environmental elements and being willing to adapt and change and draw a new road because we know what the why is. And so the why can stay the same. What are we trying to increase the probability of? We're trying to launch out new, better human beings, and then we can stay focused on that. That doesn't change, but the technology, the mechanisms of that are going to need to change and pivot all the time. I mean, gosh, I'd never heard of GBT chat a month, 2 months ago. I had no idea what that was, but it's a new reality. And this is just going to be the way it is in the 21st century. It's going to be one where we're just going to have to be learning all the time and pivoting all the time and adapting, because what we're trying to do will always be important.
I agree with that. And I'm doing a little plug here. When I interviewed the CIO of UCF, Matt Hall, you brought it up with, all that stuff, and we'll talk AI in another episode. But that's the people we're also interviewing, so all of us can gain insight about what's happening on our roadmap. Frank, thank you for the honesty. We do that one thing at the end, but I want to go to CL with the same 2 questions.
Yeah, it's very similar. I mean, be intentional in the conversation. I'm, always open to kind of get people together in a room to discuss how we see things changing and what we should be doing. So I think if people want to be part of that conversation, I'm always looking to get people together to do that, regardless of rank, position, anything like that, because it's going to take all of us in order to make this thing work. And then again, in terms of the roadmap, I had to draw a couple new roads, Frank. Yeah, you have to be flexible. I mean, I like what you said about being flexible, adaptable, and agile. That's true. I mean, even in my role as AD Jedi, just making sure that the field is always changing. Political contexts are always changing, but we have a commitment to do the work. That doesn't change, but it's the ways in which we go about doing the work. And so, staying true to what we're trying to accomplish through that, and being flexible with our external community partners, with our students that are interested, with our students who don't yet know about us that will, right, when we start making connections, and how do we fold them into what we're trying to do here at UVA and the A School. And then also, just in all of that, I think one of the things that there's 2 things there: to remain intentional and to remain human. Mm. And no matter what we're trying to do, let's be intentional about our work, and let's be human. Let's treat each other with respect, and let's do the right thing.
Wow. Okay, that's great. So this is the most uncomfortable part for us, not for you all. I asked you on the show to follow the purpose, building better pathways for student support success, and thank you for your contribution, everything you've done. I don't know which one to lean towards to go first, but we have this thing called the 1 thing. Now it's the 2 thing because of both of y'all. But I did this with Binghamton and NCAT when they were talking about what they thought about Family Weekend, including that, blah, blah, blah. But at the end, after the discussion, I allowed them to say what they really want the listeners to hear about them. Don't worry about anything we've said. I'd love to give you a platform for as long as you want, both of you. just to say to our listeners what's important and what they need to walk away with and actually do something today to make a change. I'm going to zip it. Well, actually, I can't say that yet. We got to pick person to go first, and then I'll zip it. So who wants to go first, CL or Frank?
Oh, CL does.
Okay. CL, 3, 2.
Yeah, so for me, I'll just keep it simple. I think that the work that we do in terms of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion is paramount to save society. We have to be more inclusive in our actions. We have to be more equitable in the decisions that we make, not only for the built environment, but just society in general. And I just hope that, you can take a little bit from the words that I've talked about today in the podcast to really think about your own responsibility into creating a more just and equitable world.
Gosh, I'll do. CL is awesome, by the way. I'm just glad you reunited me with my brother here. And let me just say, I think what we are doing is really important in all the conversation about higher education. There's plenty of critics of higher education these days, and it's often reduced to a bunch of skills. So that people can get a job. And I think the vision is much larger than that. The vision is to people who are going to build bridges between people, who are going to tackle poverty, climate change, issues of justice, and eroding abuse in the world. I mean, there's so many things. We've got to launch out really good, solid human beings, and the way we construct these experiences matter. And in the 21st century, that first job that they prepared with very specific skills is not going to be their second job or their third job. We've lost sight momentarily. We'll come back to this, to think that higher education is about preparing someone for that very first job out, and it's just not. It's about building better human beings and making the world better for everyone. And that is a life worth living. And so thanks for you all for being part of that big calling that we're all part of. It's been fun, David. Thanks for having CL and I on the podcast.